people's future by helping them get on the road to financial independence. She's passionate about developing leaders and helping individuals realize their true potential. She also has a heart for educating and empowering women on wealth building strategies and entrepreneurship. Hi, Jess. Thanks for getting on with me. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I was like going on and on about ADHD and money, and then I realized it wasn't live. So I'll talk about that later, and we'll get right to your interview because I know how valuable your time is. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Thank you for coming on today. Can you just
Absolutely.
I read your LinkedIn bio. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am a mom of 3. My oldest is about to turn 7. So I had 3 kids in 3.5 years, and it was quite a journey. I was actually working as a newspaper owner at the time, which was very demanding, with the news cycle. So I decided in the midst of that to start doing something I was really passionate about, which was helping educate families on money. And so I got all of my licenses and I started training and I started seeing families. And I did this because it made a huge difference in our life and I wanted to make an impact in other people's lives. But I didn't really realize what an impact I was making until I started actually sitting down with families. I think financial literacy is one of the most important things that we need to keep our marriage healthy, just to keep our sanity right. And a lot of us just are not getting it. So I just do a lot of educating, and I'm really excited to be here with you today to talk to you about some things that we can do to relieve the stresses of finances and money, especially if we're dealing with ADHD.
Right. So thank you so much for introducing yourself that way. And we know why you're so passionate with how much you've helped families. And it's such a beautiful thing when you get that financial base. And I was talking a little bit about how mental health and financial health are so closely related. And if we don't have a secure financial house, we're stressed. Even if we don't notice it, it takes a toll on us. And if you have ADHD, you already have other mental stresses you might be dealing with on top of financial stress. So that's why I thought it was so important to get you on here today to talk with us about how to build that financial piece more securely so that you do have that time and that security that we need to feel calm and relaxed. I wanted to ask you about some of your experience with clients. I know you've worked with families. Have they seen changes in their life? I know you've seen positive changes. I've definitely seen positive changes since I've taken more control of my finances. I'm definitely still a work in progress. But when their finances are under control, do you see a difference? What do you see with families with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I see a lot of relief. We go from starting in a place of, well, it's so funny. Like a lot of people sometimes will be like, well, let me get my stuff in order before you help me get my stuff in order. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works. Like I'm going to be with you from the beginning, like let's go over everything so that you can start to get everything in line. And, once we do that initial financial plan, because everyone needs a written game plan, you need a GPS. You can't just wing it, right? I'm in New Jersey right now. Next week I'll be in Florida. Woohoo! But you're in Texas, right? So if I'm going to get to where you are, I need to follow a GPS or at the very least written directions. Otherwise, I'm not going to get there. So if it makes sense to use a GPS to get somewhere physically, wouldn't it make sense to use a GPS to get somewhere financially, right? But we don't do that. We just wing it. We just get in the car, I'm going to drive to Texas, and then we're like all over the place, right? So I help families to start thinking about their finances that way as it is a journey, and you said something, I'm still a work in progress. And that's absolutely right. It's not something we just make the plan and then, that's it. It's a work in progress, just like our health is a work in progress, right? You're either getting healthier or you're getting unhealthier. You're not staying stagnant. So, communication with your spouse about your budget, right? That's not something that you just do once and then it's done. It's something that you guys have to continuously come to the table about and communicate about and make sure you're staying on top of it. Just like you have to make sure that you're staying on top of your diet or you're staying on top of your exercise, right? Like that never goes away. So, the first thing that we have to work on, guys, is our mindset. Right? And thinking about your finances as this organic live thing that is with you through your life. and the mindset. And then the second thing is education, right? Once we have the right relationship with money, understanding that it's just another thing, like we have a relationship with food, or we have relationships with, you know, shopping, right? Just when we recognize that it's just another relationship like that, then we have to get the education, figure out where we want to go, what our goals are, what our lifestyle, what kind of lifestyle that we want to have, and then work on that plan, and then start rolling it out.
And it's so important that you said the mindset piece. So I think too, I have a lot of financial education. I actually worked with a mentor who is financially independent. And to me, that was such a lofty goal. And when I first started working with her, she could give me the tools and tips, right? But if I wasn't implementing them, it wouldn't work. But I also realized I hadn't worked out the mindset piece yet. And how do you, what are some tips to help people work out the mindset piece? Because like you said, it's a relationship. You gave us a ton of awesome metaphors about what the relationship with money can be like. What's maybe a tactical type tip that we could think? Should we journal about it? Like, how do we figure out our money story so we can go, and then when we get the education, we're ready to take it? Because people can tell you things, but if you're not ready to hear it, you're not going to take action. So what is something we could do for the mindset piece to kind of get us in right? Because this, we're going to talk about education in a minute here, but what's like a mindset thing we could do like right now? Something you could do to think about how to change your mindset around money.
Well, I mean, you know, you just said something, right? Like if we're not ready to do something, then we can't expect results. So I think the first thing is being honest with yourself. Are you ready to actually put down a budget and adhere to that budget? Are you ready to do that? If you're not ready to do that, are you ready to make a deal with yourself that you're going to be disciplined if it requires to be disciplined, right? Like if one of your goals, for example, is getting out of debt, how did you get there to begin with, right? It might be some self-control issues, or it might have just been bad planning. So for me, that's kind of like a very broad question. And I think a lot of times I will give different mindset advice depending on where someone's coming from, right? So, you know, a lot of times with mindset training, we either say like you're operating from a place of faith or fear, you're either afraid of failure or you're afraid of success. These are all things that I kind of have to evaluate before saying, okay, this is the issue and this is what we need to continue to talk about and to continue to help you fix.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And you are, and that's what's so great about when people do work with you. And I'll tell you how you can work with her later, but how people can work with you, you're going to see the pieces they might be missing to help bring that forward for them. So thank you. You're so wonderful. I'm so glad you're here. So my next question is actually similar to what you're talking about the discipline piece. Is ADHDers are notoriously impulsive. So you kind of like make decisions based on what you feel like, not what the plan might be or not what you know you should do. So how can we stop feeling guilty about purchases? Like if you're, and I'm not going to get too deep into self-medicating with shopping, but it is a thing. It's a behavior that's attached. Whereas shopping, if you're if you're overloading with the shopping, it's definitely a self-medicating behavior. I don't want to talk about that piece. I want to talk about just regular purchases. How do we feel not guilty about them? What's the way we can go back on ourselves and say, it's okay that I spent that?
Okay, so I would say that would require actually some forethought. Make a budget. Mm-hmm. What are my needs? What are my wants? Talk to your spouse. What are my needs? What are our needs? What are our wants? And put them into two categories, right? Yeah. And that's something that you're going to have to work on and keep coming back to that list and program your brain. So one of the things we talk about when we're getting to the right mindset that we want about anything, about business, about the correct eating, whatever, is our brains are amazing, right? They're malleable. And when we feed our brain information, it's actually going to create pathways so that our brain just automatically starts to behave a certain way when we get some kind of stimulus in our face, right?
Yes.
So let's, for example, it's like that expensive, I don't know, like let's just say it's chia seeds, right? Like you're trying to eat healthy and you know that you should be buying chia seeds, but like when you go to buy that, you're like, wait, is this an impulse buy or is this is something expensive? Like, should this be in my budget? Right? Well, that is a limiting belief that you gave to yourself because you're like, oh, I have ADHD. I'm an impulse buyer and therefore this is a bad purchase, right? Like that's the old kind of thought process, right? So now you have to reprogram your brain, and it starts with having that conversation with yourself or your spouse or whoever you're having life with. Put those things on paper and start forcing yourself to think about those things in a new way. Like, this is an expensive purchase, but it's part of my self-care and it's built into my budget that I put down on paper. So this is okay. And the repetition of that every time you're going shopping is going to now give you a new thought process with that product.
Yes, you'll build that new pathway, and then it'll feel safe because it's in your needs, because you picked it, you've taken it as a need because you've chosen. And again, we're getting into intentional living, which is like a huge thing for me. Knowing what you want first before you go purchase. If you know, like, hey, for me, I value working out, so I pay for a gym and I spend $90 a month, but that's something that I've chosen and thought about, not I went out and bought a gym membership for the year for $1,200 today because I want to get in shape, which is a total different way of doing it. So thank you so much for giving us that process. I really wanted to hear that for my ADHD audience too.
Sure.
My next question is, what's one piece of financial security that you believe every family should have?
One piece of financial security, like a product, you mean?
Probably like a product.
Okay. So the first thing is the game plan, the written game plan. That's the first thing that every single family should have. Most families don't have, but every family should have. The second thing is I'm probably going to say life insurance. And again, I hate to make blanket statements about things that people should have because everyone's situation is different, right? But you said family, right? So when I think of family, I think about people that are living life together. So, you know, for example, you and your husband, you both contribute to the household either by labor or monetary, right? And you have kids and you have bills and you have responsibilities. So you take one of you out of the equation, you are now, even if it's just labor, when the labor is equated to monetary value as well, right? So you take someone away from that equation, husband or wife, you now have a financial deficit. And you're putting all of your family at monetary risk, your lifestyle at risk, your future at risk. This is when people start to, you see those GoFundMe pages, you see people borrowing money out of their 401k, having to sell their house, winding up getting into debt, right? So really understanding the value of what you bring to the table on a monthly, annual basis over the long haul, right? Like if you have little kids, you need at least a 30-year term. Whatever you're making per year, multiply that by 30, and then also take into consideration saving for college. How much debt do you have? You know, did you just buy your house or do you only have 10 years left on it? These are all things that need to be considered when you're figuring out how much life insurance that you need. So I would say that's the foundation. You know, you talked about building a financial house before. That's the foundation. If you're building the other parts of the house and you don't have a strong foundation, you put a little bit of pressure somewhere on that house, it's going to fall down.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And then I guess here's my other question. This is like such a big question. I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, wow. But what is one thing you sort of wish everybody knew about building wealth? And you've given us a ton of tips, but what's like one thing you wish more people knew about building wealth?
Yep. So 1 in 4 people own a mutual fund. 4 in 4 people should own mutual funds.
Yes.
Now, what kind of mutual funds, all that stuff, I can't go into specifics because, again, everybody's different. Everyone has different needs. But everyone should know the definition of a mutual fund, and everyone should have that inside of their portfolio. I don't ever really recommend, when I'm doing a plan, I don't ever really recommend doing individual stocks.
Okay.
I'm not saying you can't make money with individual stocks, but if I just had to give you like a simple answer, it's mutual funds.
Mutual funds. And it's about, and do you give, and of course, like the percentages and how much people should put in, all of that is so personalized and individual that people could book a one-on-one with you, right, to figure out all that stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Like sometimes I'll sit down with someone and they'll be like, well, what's the average that a person needs to save? And I'm like, well, are they starting to save at 20 years old? Or are they starting to save at 50 years old?
Right.